Hi, welcome to What's My Podcast. I'm Jen, and I'm a library specialist for Arapahoe Library District. I love reading and learning new things, and in the last couple years, I've really gotten into podcast listening for information and entertainment. Today's segment of What's My Podcast is Author Talks. I've done hours of listening to different content to weed out some suggestions for you. The first podcast is called Author Hour. This one is interview style for nonfiction genres like business, fitness, investing, self-help, etc. Listeners will get an entertaining and useful summary of each book. This podcast is hosted by Drew Applebaum. Drew is the executive director of audience and communication at Forbes. He has also worked in communication and media for most of his career. This podcast is for you if you like pretty straightforward interview style, the simplicity of short episodes, and to-the-point interviews. Could also be motivating if you are starting a new business, starting a new fitness routine, or learning about investing. The next one is Inside the Minds of Authors. This is interviews and conversations with popular and up-and-coming authors on their books, hobbies, and what inspires them. They have a wide range of guests from children's authors, young adult authors, general fiction, Christian fiction, romance, and you name it. Hosted by DC Gomez. DC Gomez is a USA Today bestselling author. She writes in multiple genres from urban fantasy, contemporary lit, young adult, children's, and even devotionals. This podcast is for you if you like fiction. If you like to hear the author read their content and listen to authors discuss what motivates them, then you will definitely enjoy this podcast. The next one we're going to cover is the Christian Speculative Fiction Podcast. Speculative fiction is a broad category of fiction that covers various themes of supernatural, futuristic, and many other imaginative topics. So in this podcast, they have discussions that cover the author's craft, publishing and promotion, and how faith intersects with stories. This podcast is hosted by Paul Regnier, who is a mystery and speculative fiction author. This podcast is for you if you like Christian fiction and if you like fantasy and sci-fi. This podcast will have more in-depth conversations, and the episodes will be more than an hour long. The next podcast is Bookworm, produced by KCRW. This is a podcast of intellectual, accessible, and provocative literary conversations. It's hosted by Michael Silverblatt, who is a literary critic and American broadcaster. This podcast is for you if you like a wide range of genres covered. The next one is Story of a Storyteller. We all love to read, watch, and play stories of all kinds, but haven't you ever wondered about the people that tell those stories? Join author Conor Bredden as he interviews other storytellers, learning about their childhood, challenges they've overcome, and what brought them to writing in the first place. Conor Bredden is a multi-genre author, podcaster, and budding audiobook narrator based in Dublin, Ireland. The next podcast we're going to discuss is The New Yorker, The Writer's Voice. Now, The New Yorker magazine has lots of different podcasts of different styles. So this specific one, The Writer's Voice, is New York fiction writers who read their stories. This podcast is for you if you like to hear authors who read their content and learn more about New York City fiction writers. There's so many podcasts out there, and sometimes it can take time to find what you like. Podcast listening can be great when folding laundry, walking your dog, or grocery shopping. Another great way to browse in your podcast app is using keywords. For this category, some good keywords are authors, stories, interviews. If you have a recommendation for a category you'd like to hear, please comment below. I do the listening to find quality recommendations for all audiences. All of these podcasts can be found on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, or wherever you like to listen.